Yeah, welcome back, everyone, to our Pre-Sunken City #1 tournament. Thank you so much for sticking through all of the waits here as we get ready to get into our second top 4 match. I am Dragonrider, and for our second top 4 match, joined by Dragoninja. How are you doing?
Hello. I'm doing quite well. I'm excited to cast the top 4 going into this. I mean, we got a lot of players that have been performing pretty well going into this tournament.
Yeah, it's been really great seeing the progression that some of these players have made, and I know both of us are kind of familiar with some of the players that have played in this, and maybe less familiar with some of the players. But you were mentioning Matt R, who we're going to be seeing this, is one of the kind of grinders for the Master Store qualifiers. So you've at least seen him quite a few.
Yeah, I've lost him a few times, so
Oh no!
I know that he's no joke.
As well, I am excited as we're going to be getting to see him play here. But we are playing, for those who may be just joining us, we are playing a standard Conquest best of 3 series for these games. So can you walk us through the decks that these players have brought today?
Matt R brought your standard Kazakhstan Druid, ramping up to that Kazakhstan end game, followed by a Rally Priest, which is more of a combo style spell deck, and brought the Buff Paladin, which is just a more anti-aggro version of Paladin, a little more proactive with its plays. Min brought an aggro priest, brought a beast druid that was banned, and brought a face hunter. So we're going to be seeing Min try to run face hunter and a lot of these other aggressive decks into the Kazakhstan druid, which is the deck that it looks like Min was looking to target, as the Kazakhstan druid for Matt R did not get banned.
Yeah, and did they bring pretty standard lists, or is there anything that's kind of a little unusual, or is it they're pretty standard lists?
Everything looks pretty standard to me. Najak Hexen in the priest for Min, that aggro priest, might prove to be a big tempo swing if it's played into the buff paladin. You could grab one of those big minions if you buff it up with a blessing of authority. Najak can kind of throw a wrench in that. But other than that, it seems pretty standard on both players' parts.
We had the bands in already, correct? What are the bands here?
Matt R had his Rally Priest band away.
Okay.
And Min had his Beast Druid band away.
Yeah, it's a Beast Druid. I mean, we just saw in the previous series Beast Druid being played on both sides of the board, and man, it can just put out some insane boards really quickly. And even when they seem like small boards, they can really like pack a punch on some of those turns. So it seems pretty reasonable to just, especially with all of the different archetypes of Druid at this point, like just get Druid out of there. Like, don't worry about it. We're getting the Druid out of there. So yeah, very interesting to see how these kind of different archetypes are popping up, though, because like I said, Face Hunter and both players bringing Priest, we didn't see those in the other series that we got to watch. So it's kind of interesting how these players have put together some varying lineups for this tournament.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think what we're seeing here is it looks like Min went with a full aggro lineup, looking to target Kazakhstan Druid and other decks that are a little bit slower but have a lot more power. And we're seeing that Matt R bringing that Kazakhstan Druid does have a weak point in his lineup that's going to be exploited by Min. But that's also speaking on the pretense that Kazakhstan Druid isn't going to hit the cards it needs. I mean, if Kazakhstan hits innervates when it needs to hit lightning blooms, when it needs to hit it overgrowths, that Kazakhstan could come down turn 3, turn 5, and there's not much an aggro deck can do if you're already pumping out massive treasures by the turn 7.
Yeah, that's very true. So let's we're gonna be getting into the first game here momentarily. Any predictions on how these games are gonna go, or what you think the players might bring in first, or what they're gonna be looking for in these actual matchups, hoping to hit a certain matchup?
My prediction is if I were in Min's situation, I would play my aggro priest first, going into hopefully into the Kosakhan Druid, but playing the aggro priest first because it has a better matchup against the buff paladin. For Matt R, I'd probably run my buff paladin since it's got a better matchup than the other two compared to the Kosakhan. But there could be a little mind games with Matt R. queuing the Kosakhan Druid first, hoping to either high roll or lose and get it out of the way, and hopefully take the priest with it. So we'll have to see which strategy these players take.
Yeah, it's always kind of interesting. I think, especially when you have these single elimination tournaments, or I think honestly, even also as best of threes, where it's like, do you go for like your strongest deck first? Do you hope to just get a win early and then you have a little bit more leeway in like the second game? Or do you go for like the mind games of, I think they're going to go for this first, so I'm going to queue this first? Or is it a matter of, I don't really care because it's Conquest, I'm just going to, players think I'm just going to play it randomly and not give my opponent any info? Like, I love the kind of different mind games that the players can play with queue order as well.
Yeah. I mean, and sometimes queue order like matters to a degree and sometimes it doesn't. But at the end of the day, do they hit Trog? Is it turn one Trog? That's what's going to come down to in a lot of these matchups on Min's side. If that turn one Trog comes down against a buff Paladin, there's not a lot the Paladin can do. And there's not a lot the Kosakhan Druid can do.
Yeah.
So the mulligans are going to be incredibly important in both these matchups.
It's kind of interesting. I feel like right now, a lot of players are talking about polarized matchups, but in any meta, whether it's polarized or not, yeah, mulligan is very important. And especially when there are cards like you were talking about, like Trog, and how impactful that actually can be in some of the matchups. So we are getting ready to jump into game number 1 here. And we're going to see it is the priest versus the druid.
That Void Touch Attendant in the starting hand is massive. That's a lot of damage just stored in that 1/3. Cult Neophyte as well. Also, a lot of disruption to Matt R's game plan. Ruins a lot of the ramp. A lot of the goal of the deck is using spells to get up to as much mana as possible. So Cult Neophyte can stop that by a whole turn, which, with that Void Touch Attendant in hand, Matt R might not have an extra turn.
Oh yeah, that Void Touch Attendant. The 3 health, though, I think is something that actually is relevant, especially as we see a Lunar Eclipse in hand for Matt R as well. It's the 3 health is always something that's been very interesting to me because 3 health can be so good or not really relevant. It's more relevant in things like the Scale of Onyxia that we'll see come down later, where it's going to take 2 of those minions to trade. Whereas things like the Lunar Eclipse, the 3 health, yeah, great. It's going to die in 1 hit.
Yeah, I mean, the Lunar Eclipse for Matt R sitting in his hand might be the one thing that could bail him out of this early game snowball situation. It kind of forces men to either go all in with the Void Touch Attendant and just tank the loss, or he's going to have to wait and hit it with a Chaplain a little bit later. I mean, as for this turn, I don't see how Matt R removes this 1/4 in any scenario.
No, I don't think this is getting removed for a while. And the kind of interesting thing I think about this matchup too is that there is kind of a back and forth, I feel like, from the druid side of how can I balance when I'm killing these minions? How fast can I kill these? And do I then have to worry about which minions I'm killing for raise dead? Because sometimes, like, if you only kill a certain number of minions, they're pretty much guaranteeing that your opponent is going to get those back from raise dead. And that could be a huge detriment as well.
Yeah, exactly. I think Min just made a game-winning play, potentially. That holding on to the Void Touch Attendant to move it up to 5 health, moving it out of Lunar Eclipse range, is absolutely massive. And if Guardian Aug Merchant off the top, they can't even play the 4 attack card they have in their hand with a hero power to remove this Void Touch Attendant. This might be the beginning of a snowball scenario.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Cult Neophyte is played alongside Guardian Aug Merchant. Matt R cannot Lightning Bloom into Scale of Onyxia. So that means you can't really get rid of this board in any meaningful way. Again, it comes down to what I was saying earlier. That extra turn that Cult Neophyte's going to buy might be a turn that Matt R can't afford to lose.
I mean, I don't know what Matt does at this point. I guess Amulet and a hero power, but this Neophyte, yeah, just this is feeling really rough from Matt's perspective. Just this hand ended up being way too slow and not enough answers. There's not very many answers in the deck, period, but the one Lunar Eclipse just is not enough.
You can't really count Madar out of the game, though. I mean, Kazakhstan Druid has so many chances for high roll. I mean, with the Lightning Bloom in hand, it could be a Kazakhstan top deck next turn, Lightning Bloom Kazakhstan, and then a good treasure off the top could put Madar not only back in the game, but in a winning position.
Yeah, that's true. I guess at this point, maybe Matt is just trying to hope that the game is slowed down just enough to get to those points. But do you think that it's going to go that long based on this start from Min?
I can't say much for sure, but it's not looking great.
Yeah.
There's not much time left in this game. There's maybe 1-2 turns. I mean, Mr. Smite in hand even. So even if Matt R gets away on the board, if he's at 6 or less health, it won't matter much at all. We're already looking at 2, 4, 6, 8 damage on board, I believe. Yeah, that Void Touch Attendant is just not going to die anytime soon.
That's an upgrade. Probably. What is it?
The Scale of Onyxia does go on long. There may be potentially an out here.
There was a little bit of hesitation there, really debating on how to actually make these trades. And this is a tough spot. I don't think there's one easy way to make these trades because, again, you're trying to slow down as much damage as possible, which would mean trying to take out the Void Touched Attendant. And there's a lot of trades you have to make into that one minion. And again, there is that threat potential of the Raised Dead. Yeah, it does decide to go for it, but this is... I did not envy that decision by Matt.
No, not whatsoever. Especially because, Tour Guide gives... You can hero power this turn, Tour Guide next turn into a Mr. Smite with a 0-cost hero power, which is 8 burst, and you put him down to 7. Matt R's only hope is if that Lightning Bloom... Well, he's going to be overloaded too, though. Huh. I don't think there's a good way out of this.
That was just such an aggressive, nutty start from Min.
Trying to rack my brain for any way that Matt could get out of this. I can't think of a single thing.
I wonder. Quickly. Here for the door.
Having to go for the overload with obviously this is so tough. Like I almost feel so bad for Matt because this is like what you said, it's just a complete snowball of a game, and having to have previously used a bloom and being overloaded now means that now the bloom can't come out this turn for Cenarian Ward. And it's like Matt, I think Matt had to go for the removal that last turn, though. Otherwise, there would be no chance now. But it's just one of those scenarios where, like, it feels so bad because it's like you have to go for that play, but now it's making your next play feel so bad as well. There was a little bit of armor gain here, though, at least.
Yeah, it's not enough to take back the board. It's not going to be enough to avoid this Mr. Smite that's coming down this turn, most likely. And we're going to be... He bought himself a turn, just a little bit less health now. Whatever comes out of this Cenarian Ward has to be a taunt. Or something with Rush.
Wow. Well, that's it. That's an answer.
That's what Druid does.
Yeah.
That's so mean. Is there any way Min could get past that without activating that death rattle?
Well,
Massive.
Quite what was planned.
I don't even know what we're watching anymore. What has been happening in this game? Like, this is just crazy.
I mean, as I predicted in the pregame,
Yes.
that's wild.
But it's still 1 damage off. Or 2 damage off.
I mean, I think
Aldo.
he's got to kill the 1/4 to get it back, though.
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh, well, okay. Not gonna do it.
I mean, nutty start from Min into some pretty good recovery from Matt R. Some great hand reads, some great board reads, and understanding what Matt R. needed to do to get to that point of stabilizing the board, and that just crazy top deck. Crazy top deck to pull that game back from. Pretty much a high roll loss.
Yeah. Yeah, that was pretty crazy. But we're gonna get into game number 2. Matt R sticking with that druid, and Min going to bring in that face hunter. I'm sure hoping to reenact that first game, right? Get a nutty start to the game, but this hand so far is not quite looking as strong as that priest hand.
Yeah, there's nothing to stick that doggy biscuit to. Nothing in the druid's deck that you necessarily want a piercing shot early. I mean, Thurium's a 1-drop, but let's be honest, there's only one 1-drop in that deck that Min truly wants. Not terrible. It's not terrible, it's not great.
Yeah. At least there is
How's
the
it
benefit
going?
of coin if if Min really wants to just get on board. It's going to leave the mid or the next couple of turns maybe lacking, but there is a lot of low curve cards to draw too. So yeah, getting out on board here seems so good.
Exactly. I think Min's logic behind this is either I pretty much win in the early game and finish it out mid game, because if we save any resources for mid game, I think Matt's going to be able to stabilize that board and bring that game back. I mean, we already see a little bit of ramp, the Lightning Bloom available to Matt R, Katsukan, and the skill of Onyxia. So Min has maybe 2 more turns until it's going to be really difficult to keep anything on board.
Oh, yeah. I love this choice too. I was thinking for a second there, which minion do you want to put it on? But, and even the top deck draw of the Lunar Eclipse too. I was thinking the exact line of thinking would be to play around Lunar Eclipse mostly, maybe the 4 attack from Amulet. So buffing the taunt there to the 6 health is so crucial. And then the top deck Lunar Eclipse and Amulet are in hand.
I mean, it just goes to show that even though it's an aggro deck, it isn't being played brain dead. There's a lot of decisions being made that are each individually mattering a lot to how this early game board state is going to be able to stick on board and threaten Matt.
Yeah, and I think, some players who might not have as much experience, or maybe they're not anticipating what's going to be coming out from the opponent, might have thought it doesn't matter which minion you buff, right? Just get the buff out there, push that damage. But we see it absolutely is making a difference which minion is buffed here. And I mean, if Min had buffed just the cub there, yeah, Matt R would be able to turn this board state around completely. There still is potential, like you said, you never really count Druid out, especially when there's ramp, there's removal with the Scale of Onyxia, there's Kazakhstan stuff. There's a lot that Druid can do still coming up, but wow, these are the kind of plays that Min is using to their advantage.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of Scale of Onyxia, we're going to see that Min only had a measly 3 turns before Druid was able to start doing Druid stuff. Not only does he turn the board around, he also gains board presence. The Warsong Wrangler misses both of the rhinos.
Yeah. That's pretty unfortunate from this perspective, especially when you're staring down this 2/1 whelp. It'd be so great to buff that rhino and try to get on board, or even having the potential of buffing the rhino to be able to hopefully contest something that comes out of a Cenarian ward in the future too. But yeah, does miss on that. Maybe Min can try to go a little wider with picking up these buff Wolpertinger now, but yeah, this hand is now looking really awkward. The initial first turns looked fantastic. Now the hand is a little bit awkward.
Yeah, I agree. I think for Min that the clock is ticking down very fast. If Matt R picks up an Innervate or a Lightning Bloom next turn, we're probably going to see a Kazakhstan come down, and the game's going to shift dramatically in Matt R's favor.
Gonna be so much armor here. I love the use here from Matt of just going for this solar. A lot of people try to save the solar to use with Cenarian Ward, but it's still only I should say 7 mana turn. It's not actually turn 7 because there was a little bit of extra mana gain. But yeah, Matt is only at 7 mana right now, so waiting until 8 mana is available, or 10 mana total for both of those, seems a little bit far. And there is a lot of pressure still coming out from Min, so I do love that choice to just go for the solar there, try to get the armor, remove a body. But wow, look at this board now!
I mean, the first Warsong Wrangler, being honest, wasn't that good of a pickup, but picking up the 2 of them back-to-back,
yeah,
it's pretty massive. This 26 on board?
Yeah.
26 on board, 22 with hero power, 25, or 28.
And for
That's
Matt
it.
too, yeah, that was a bit of a whiff there as well on the Cenarian ward.
Yeah, again, we were looking for a taunt or a rush, but this double Warsong Wranglers actually kind of pulled their weight. Despite the Druid
Yeah.
doing Druid things and getting up to a crazy amount of mana and wiping the board really early, Min still clutched it out. And it looks like the game plan that Min came into this with the anti-Kazakhstan Druid, kind of worked out.
Yeah, that was, oh my gosh, it was so aggressive. And even when it looked a little bit maybe sketchy, you're like, okay, well, things aren't gonna work out. And then Min just got the draws, and it was like amazing. Like you said, one draw, okay. The second draw back to back, game over.
Yeah. I mean, and even in the first game, I'm still reeling from the Najek Hexen top deck. Exactly when it needed to happen. It's a work of art.
And sometimes that's how the tournaments have to go, right? Sometimes you have to not only play well, you have to hit good matchups, but sometimes you got to get lucky with those draws and top decks as well. And they all converged into the perfect scenario for Min with that 2-0.
Yeah, I mean, went into the tournament going, we're going to ruin Kazakhstan Druid, and when you roll into someone who's got Kazakhstan Druid, you would expect your game plan to at least ruin the Kazakhstan Druid to a little bit. Yeah, but it was great play from both players. Fantastic hand predictions, reading of potential options, knowing their threats, dodging removals, setting up future plays. I mean, both players played fantastic.
Yes. Yeah, they did. And like you said, I mean, you've faced Matt R multiple times. You've seen him appear in tournaments. Like, he's no stranger to tournaments and competition. So I'm sure probably not even nervous or anything like that at all. But it's just the lineup wasn't quite a match. The starting hands didn't quite work out in Matt's favor either. So very unfortunate there for Matt. But yeah, played again, like we saw in the first top 4 series, played as well as they could with what they got.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, that's what Hearthstone is. You get what you're given, and then you work with what you've got.
Yeah. Yes, but I mean, made it to our top 4, so definitely kudos to Matt, and we will be seeing Min face off versus Thiago in our finals, which we will get to momentarily here. But thank you so much for joining me for this casting. It was an absolute pleasure. And again, anybody watching this, you can check out more from Dragoninja in the description. And is there anything else that you want to say before we wrap up here?
I appreciate you having me. I love the opportunity, and I love being able to cast players that don't usually get screen time. So that's great.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you again for joining.